Good morning, Empire citizens! We've got an amazing broadcast for you today, but before we dive into that, some news first. Rumors state that a blue who stole away onto a ship and fled the planet has been found and is returning home. As you all know, blues are notorious for violent crimes across the Empire, and being sent to war is one of the few ways that we can give them an outlet for their violent urges without hurting the rest of the population. This blue was given momentarily leave to return home, but after being unable to vent her urges in a healthy way, she attacked her higher-ups and fled onto a ship that brought her somewhere else in the known galaxy. Details are fuzzy, but it's been rumored that the Gold Council themselves wish to see her. What this could mean is up for interpretation. Is she being called there to be given judgment? Is she being returned in chains? Or did she come willingly? She's due to arrive any moment. We'll update you as soon as we find out more. Hello everyone, I hope you like what you saw. I'm so excited to be doing this. I'm going to do a few different little activities and go ahead and do a little bit of a reading from the first chapter at the end. So stay tuned. I'm going to see if I can address a lot of different questions as I'm doing this, and if there's any other questions that you guys have, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm going to be in there answering whatever I can, interacting with you guys. I'm really excited to be doing this. I cannot explain how excited I am to get this book released. So, without further ado, let's get started. Who is my cover artist? My cover artist is Gabrielle Ragusin. I feel like I butchered that. I'm so sorry, Gabrielle. But Gabrielle is fantastic. She's done Viridis and she's done Caerule. And I am really hoping that she's going to be down for doing the next book after this. And she does great work. Honestly, if you're looking for a cover artist for your project, I would definitely recommend her. When do you know your book is ready to be published? Well, for me, it was a feeling. With Caerule, I got to a point and I was like, this is a great stopping point. I've said everything else that I wanted to say in this book. Going on longer would start different arcs, would start different perspectives, and I didn't want to dive into that in one ginormous book, right? So for me, it was just a sense of, I think I'm done. For me, it was like a sense of being done, but also to just recognizing that you don't want to spend all your time working on one project. You want to start trying new things, you want to improve and show that improvement, and sometimes the only way to express that improvement and what you've learned is by starting a new project. Building up from the ground up with all those new knowledge bits, I guess, is a way to say it. How long did it take you to complete Caerule? I think it took me 2 or 3 years. I started drafting different starts and different ideas for Caerule when I was in the publishing stages of Viridis. I was trying out different ideas, but they never survived. So based off when I finally got that start that I think worked, I think it took me about 2 years to do it, which is actually pretty good. I mean, for me at least. I was pretty excited because Viridis took me way longer than that, and Caerule's taken less time. What are the major themes of this book? I think that Viridis specifically was the horror of the current events, perhaps the helplessness in some ways, and Caerule is more about change, the spark of new life, the beginning steps of new life. I think that's more or less what the themes of this book is, without giving too much away. How do you prep for publication? Basically, I mean, you've got the rough draft. Don't publish your rough draft. It's just a bad idea. For me, when I finish a rough draft, I bring up a whole nother doc right next to each other on my laptop screen, side by side, 50-50, and I rewrite the whole entire thing. I do this about 3 times. Once I've finished rewriting it for the 4th or 5th time, I then go on to edits. This will be just either small revisions or just in general more copy line editing sort of stuff. And once I kind of get that all sorted out, I then open things up for beta readers. So once you get those all back, you then take those and you edit from that feedback. And you're like, okay, this looks pretty solid. You're probably sick of reading your book by now, or at least in some part. And then you go ahead and you get that editor. You figure out who's going to be able to edit your book, what their time frame is, their cost, etc., and go ahead and get your book out there that way. So then you get that, content editing done, and then you go for copy edits. So then you get that done. And during all this time, you got to be marketing and prepping for your release day. So generally, having an idea of when you want to release is a good idea. I made the mistake with Viridis of not having enough time to prep before release, and so I'm trying to change that with Caerule, giving it a little bit more time to breathe, to grow, for things to change a little bit, and to be marketing, and to be asking people to review it, all that stuff. And so then I guess once you kind of got all those copy edits and those content edits done, then you go ahead and you have the book, you make sure that you get proof copies, and you're like, okay, these look great, these look good. And then you go ahead and start asking for ARC reviewers, advanced reader copy reviewers. Wherever you're going to be bringing people in, try to get reviews on that site for day one. I think having those reviews day one, not only does it feel great as the author, but it also feels great for readers so that they can know what they're getting into. So once you kind of do all that, you get to the release day, have some sort of build up, get excitement around it, maybe do giveaways, maybe give away a few copies of the book, signed copies, etc. Get everyone hyped, have a great release day, and get on to your next book. What got me into writing? I guess I've been storytelling for all my life. When I was young, I wanted to be a visual artist, like a painter or something. I'm really bad with color theory, so that never really happened. I do like to do art and to animate and to draw. It's an outlet for me, but writing is my general main passion. I've always wanted to tell stories, even when I thought I was going to grow up to be a visual artist. I always wanted to tell stories with my art. And when I discovered you could write books, I was like, oh shoot. That looks like fun. How do you write your books? So that's a big one. So I guess I just start off with an idea, with a character, and with an idea around what that character might be doing and is driven to do. With Jade, there is a world that is against her, and she is driven to try to stop things and try to survive. And for Eris, it looks a little bit different. Eris has been with me the same amount of time, but Jade's always been the one that's been louder. A big surprise. So yeah, I guess I just started with the character and an idea of what that character might be after and who that character is. And then I kind of start building the world around it and be like, okay, things could be easy in this sense, but what if we made them slightly different? What if we made this change? What if we made, a caste system based off eyes? And what if we made this galaxy-wide war? And went from there, basically. That's how it started, and Viri went through a million different ideas and different rewrites, a lot of which I still have. But eventually I settled on what I ended up publishing, and I'm really excited to continue to dive into that and to grow it further, and to develop it further with Caerule.
We interrupt this broadcast with important news. The Blue has arrived in Nivarpors, and we've received information that she's traveling with an 8-foot-tall person. Our reporters are busy elsewhere, so we have no photos to give you at this time, but we're hoping to catch up with them as soon as we are able. It is said that the Blue is not, I repeat, she is not in chains, and she is foaming at the mouth. Please do not approach her. We all know how Blues get when they are being brought for justice. I only hope this will not be the same situation. Stay safe out there. Back to your broadcast.
Phew, alright, that was a lot. So, we're going to change it up, and we're going to read some things. So I mentioned that I had some old writings still, and I think it would be fun to look at them. So we're going to go ahead and start with the first book that I ever wrote in my entire life, probably. Can you guys see that? The Dragonstone. I know. It's pretty impressive that I did my own cover art and I wrote my own book, and not only that, I was my own illustrator. So, I mean, I was pretty advanced as a kid. So I wrote this in 2003, 2004 for Miss Desmond's class in California. And it's pretty great. So we're gonna go ahead and read it. For years, creatures have been looking for such a stone. Nobody has found it, but I will. My name is Lauren. I've had lots of adventures. This one will be tough, but I know I can do it. So I asked the town people for some things, and you will find out what they are on my journey. My journey took me past many houses. A man ran past me. He was saying, "Fire, fire! My house is on fire." I looked to my right. He was right. His house was on fire. I quickly got out of the house. I quickly got out a fire chip. I threw it into the fire. The fire stopped. The man ran to me to thank me. "Thanks. Oh, and have this," said the man. He gave me a map to get there. "Thanks," I said, and off I went. I could barely see the top of this hill. I should use my goggles, I thought. So I reached in my backpack. I put my goggles on, and I saw red fiery eyes. For a minute, I was still. Then I quickly got 8 freeze chips and threw them all over the dragon's body. He will be frozen there for all day, I thought. So I ran through the cave and out. I thought I was out, but I wasn't. I looked up. There stood 3 caves. The caves looked at me, and I looked at them. Choose the right one and live. Choose the wrong one and fight the mystical fox. So I chose the middle one, and the cave shut behind me. I took out a mystical sword chip and dialed it in. I heard a roar. It sounded all around me. I held my sword tight, and there it stood, right in front of me, the strongest beast in this world, the mystical fox. I was puzzled for a minute. Then the battle started. He took the first cut. Then he tried to cut/scratch me, but I ran under his legs and cut him again and again. Then, with a loud roar, he grabbed me and I started for his mouth. But I cut his hand badly, and I fell on the ground, running out the door. "I've had enough. I'm going to find a place to sleep," I said. Then I saw a cave with signs, but I couldn't read because I was so tired. So I said, "I'll read it tomorrow." So I went in and set up camp. When I woke up, I decided to get my mind off of it. When I was just about out, I fell. I fell into mud, and when I looked up, I was 200 feet from the ground. When trying to get out, I remembered my ice gun. I made a little walkway and walked out. "I'm not going to do that again," I said. I packed up and read the 2 signs. "Spell house," that way. One said, "Locked gates," that way. The other said. I chose the spell house. I bought a spell book. I read all the spells, and I went to the locked gates. The gates were tall, rusty, and they were locked from the inside. I could tell, because there was no on the outside. "Ewand ketond misi," I said. Crack, 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 boom, ee! The gates were opening. Then I saw the Great Lake. It would take a day to cross it. Then I saw my friend, Dragon. He asked if I would like a ride. I answered, yes. I climbed on his back and rode off. That night I fished for food. "Do you know what's on the other side?" I asked Dragon. "Fruit, delicious fruit." And what?" I asked. A sword? Dragon said. I fell asleep at that moment, and I woke up that morning on the other side. That day, I ate fruit, and I looked for the sword. Then I found it. It was so big, I pulled it out of the ground and saw a flute. I took that too. I made a bed, and I went to sleep. I woke up and got my backpack, sword, and flute, and put them in my backpack. Then I saw this castle. I went up to the castle, and then the ground shook. I looked up and saw Zenot, the captain of the Batat planet. He was looking at me with his long black cape. His wand was long and strong, with its golden half moon at the end. I ran inside and saw another map, and I was getting closer. Well, hello, Zenor said. I turned around and saw him. Here, you can have this, Zeno said. His name's changing. He was giving me a dog-like guy with spikes on his back. Thanks, I said, and rode off. Ow, 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 the werewolf said, looking around, trying to find the werewolves. I see it in the castle where the stone was stored, I thought. I told the beast to go that way, to go to the castle. I opened the door and saw it, with a dragon carved in it, but it was too easy. It was late, so I told my pet to make sure that no one stole the stone while I'm asleep. Yep, he said. As I was going to sleep, I woke up to the sun. I grabbed the beast and backpack. I walked into the castle. Beep, beep, beep. The alarm beeped. I knew it was too easy, I said. Dark ningas. Ninigas started to appear out of nowhere. I've got it, I said. I told the beast plan and headed out the door. The ningas followed. Yes, I said, looking at the ningas trapped. I walked in and grabbed the stone. Here are the ningas. As you can see, they're very threatening. I rubbed my hand on it, taking the dragon off, and touched myself. I'm free, I said, flying around in my old dragon self. I was finally free. I flew over the dragon paradise where I would find a home. But I would always go down to the old world again and have more journeys. And the end. I understand your jealousy. This is probably the best way to break into the publishing industry. I highly rated G, as you can see. I mean, what more can you want? So that's where I started. And this is where I've gotten.
Chapter 1. Eris's feet were planted firmly in front of the gold council. A severed arm and a jar to her right. It floated in a clear liquid, bubbles suspended and frozen against its flesh. An uncomfortable human steward held it with his copper-colored hands. The arm itself was freckled and pale, with calloused fingers, now limp and unmoving within the glass. It had spilled most of its demonic blood upon the wanting Sobek dirt. But Eris had seared the edge of it with a hot blade, cauterizing the wound that had rewarded her with a most valuable prize. Jade's right arm. No, she reminded herself. The demon's right arm. You saw it plummet into the water? The Kodarian asked. Her voice was harsh, filled to the brim with gravel, and shaken in a canvas bag, sounding both quite painful and dehydrating at the same time. Her golden eyes were small, situated in leathery black skin. They scrutinized Eris's form, searching for a weakness in her resolve, in her posture, in her success. But she, no, the entire council, would find none. Eris was sure of it. Yes, councilwoman, Eris replied, her eyes moving to meet the Kodarian's. Her name was Silva, and age was beginning to crease the ebony flesh around her eyes, and particularly around her horns, which were decorated at every inch with gold jewelry. They caught the light from one of the many windows nearly 11 feet up the wall behind the council members. The smog-covered morning of Nevar drizzled through them, and neon signs stained what little sunlight the planet received with blues and purples. The demon fell into the waters, Eris continued. From such a distance, the fall itself would have broken its back. But if it did somehow survive, there are plenty of carnivorous fish. They would have eaten her before she bled out from her wound. Its wound, General, Silva replied, the slitted nostrils above her eyes flaring with aggravation. Forgive me, Eris said, bowing her head, strands of her golden hair falling from her bun to frame her face. I admit it is still difficult for me to drop the facade of its humanity. The demon was alone, then. There was no one there to help the monster struggle on. No, Councilwoman, Eris said, her voice even, just as she had practiced. She looked up at the Codarian, ensuring unflinching, guiltless eye contact. The demon was completely alone. The woman sighed and leaned back in her chair, her golden eyes flicking towards the rest of the council on her left of the semicircle table. The galaxy is safer for it, she said, her voice little more than a whisper. It was wise of you to bring what remained of this monster back to us, said the snipper, sitting on the other side of the table. Councilman Hussar, with graying pinprick hairs covering his arachnid body. The pincers on both corners of his mouth tapped idly. Eris gave him a curt smile and dipped her head once more. I am glad to have been able to find it for you all, Councilman. I hope you are able to discover the root of such a creature's existence. Let us not forget that it is because of you that this monster existed within our city's borders, growled the human, who sat directly in front of her in the U-shaped table. His name was Damien, and as Eris's eyes met his, they narrowed. You are the one who put us all in danger by not reporting the monster sooner. It could have snapped here and taken out numerous civilians. Eris kept herself from smiling. Look at you, so caring. Who would have guessed a gold would love civilians so much? I do hope that I'm able to make up for my risky decision, Eris replied. His rage was thick like sweat against her skin, making the other council members peer quizzically at him. What's the matter? Aren't you proud of me? She knew he wanted her to let it slip, to say something of their relation. But she wouldn't. She was just a lowly blue, doing her duty. That's what he wanted, wasn't it? A demon slayer, a general, the first blue to have housing on the 100th level of Nanza City. Or did it bother him that a blue had done so much, and he so little? She suppressed the humor bubbling up in her throat, fearing it might rumble out if she spoke too soon. Forgetting that, said Hussar, waving Damien's concern away with one of his 4 hands. Who is this creature you've brought to our shores? Can we bring it in? The guard behind Eris turned and opened the massive wooden door. It swung easily, hardly making a sound. Eris didn't look, not even when the beast's fleshy, hoof-like feet thumped against the marble tile. His tail brushed along the floor behind him, the scales that made up his ebony exterior sending a whispering sound through the room. He came up beside Eris, his hood pulled over his face, his eyes downcast, and the rest of the cloth falling over his shoulders. It was opened in the front to allow the nostrils on his collarbone to breathe, and to display the ivory tattoos that decorated his body. Even in the short amount of time knowing the creature, Eris was aware of his pride in his tattoos. Vix, Silva gasped, her eyes widening. That thing is huge! Eris allowed herself to glance at the 8-foot man to her left. The creature's tail swung idly, continuing the strange, unearthly sound of scales dancing over the stone floor. She had to arch her neck just to see his profile. Garuda! He spoke, his voice heavy with weight and tinged with an odd internal echo that stained each word he uttered. His large hands reached up and grabbed his hood. He pulled it down to show off his face, but instead of gawking at the strangeness of his anatomy, Silva screamed, leapt to her feet, and sent the chair clattering behind her. Its eyes are green, she screeched. Guards! What is the meaning of this? Damien demanded, slamming his hands on the table. You slay one demon to bring us another? Council members, please, Eris said, sparing a glance over her uniformed shoulder to see where the guards were. They remained at their post beside the exit, though their H-blades were now drawn, the crimson hue of the metal prepared to slice anything with a simple flick of the wrist. He is not here to harm us. He's here to ask for a place of refuge. Refuge? Silva breathed. For a green? It's a monster! Kuroda dropped to one knee, his cloak billowing up around him to show off his thickly muscled legs. He pressed his fist to the ground, while the small arms on his chest, no larger than his forearms, spread out in a gesture of welcoming or surrender. Peace, he said, his voice storming through the room and making Eris's teeth ache. Peace. Calm yourselves, Hussar said, his golden gaze situated curiously on the newcomer. He is nothing we have seen before. Blues are not known for their cunning, I'll grant you that, Silva, but I doubt even a blue would bring something to us that she did not think was safe. The blues are treacherous, Damien insisted. Surely we cannot allow this thing to remain here. He, Kuroda growled. Kuroda, he. I apologize for the surprise, council members, but I thought it imperative to bring him to you, Eris offered. If I am not mistaken, his eyes are different than that of the demons. I am unaware of the others from past documentation. Did their shade of green vary? Or were they all bright, like the one I slew? She waited as the trio peered at each other. Hussar sighed, his pincers tapping together in a thoughtful manner, bone on bone, swallowing the silence. Where is it from? Hussar asked. From a planet outside the known galaxy, Councilman, Eris answered. Impossible! Silva whispered. Impossible! No one can get through the asteroid field. His ship was badly damaged, Councilwoman. I suspect he did not make it through unscathed. He looks quite unharmed, Hussar noted. He must be rather sturdy. How far away from home is he? Year, Kuroda replied. He kept his head down, his four mandibles flaring as he spoke, a green tongue flicking behind rows of carnivorous teeth. While each mandible was rather malleable, replacing the sections of his face where cheeks should be, they still had a difficult time reproducing certain sounds from the Ost language. His R's and O's were particularly bad, often filled in with hearty exhales, leaving the listener to decipher what he was attempting to say. Hussar's brows lifted with surprise. A whole year? He looked from one council member to the next. How did you survive all that time? Sleep, Kuroda said, the word coming out more akin to sleepa. You slept the entire journey, Hussar pressed. That's quite curious. Silva looked around, saw that her fear was garnering her no sympathy, and turned to pick up her chair. The sound of her movements and the dragging of metal across the stone filled the pause in the conversation, but once she was seated, Hussar spoke again. You said that he was a refuge, General Sal. You do not wish to go home, strange creature? No. Kuroda used his smaller hands to gesture to the ground. Stay. Make safe. Make safe, Hussar repeated, tilting his head. That does not change the fact that it is a green, Silva insisted, her eyes watching Kuroda as she spoke. It is dangerous. I am peace. You are violence, Damien snapped. This is insane. He should be sent out immediately. Kuroda let out a rumbling sound from his chest, an uncomfortable hum of uncertainty as he glanced to Eris. The white markings that lined his body drew her attention, as they always did. The intricate lines across his face encircled his eyes, indicating some sort of status among his own people. A crescent shape sat higher up on his elongated, shield-like face, appearing as if a moon was dripping down towards his pupils. She tore her gaze away and faced Damien, not allowing herself to get lost in the curving strokes and curious meetings that tattooed Kuroda's blackened scales. With her focus back on him, Eris noticed Damien's sleek brown hair was growing ruffled with frustration, and the fine tuxedo he wore now looked as if it was collecting sweat along his neckline. Are you angry with me? She thought, amused. He holds no helix, Eris said evenly. And while that was the case with the green before as well, you will find that he came from outside the realm of a demon's domain, where, indeed, many green-eyed creatures live. There's a whole race of them! Surely letting this beast stand here is a danger to us all, Damien pressed. We should have them both thrown out, and that monster's head taken from its shoulders. Hush, human, Hussar muttered, lifting one hand to stop Damien. What is that sound he is making? Kuroda immediately stopped. Eris glanced at him once more before looking back at the snipper. He was uncomfortable, she explained, nervous from everyone being upset. Nervous? Hussar repeated. And it is a he? Yes, Councilman. Hussar eyed Kuroda, his dual-pupiled eyes scanning every inch. Stand, he said, gesturing to Kuroda. Kuroda, after looking for guidance from Eris, did so. She knew Hussar would find nothing to indicate Kuroda's sex between the creature's legs, and as she predicted, Hussar's brows furrowed. How can you tell? I asked him, Eris replied. He says he is both, but likes he. Hussar huffed. What does that mean, he is both? There are more pressing issues, Damien cut in, scowling at his fellow council member. This thing is a green human. You are on repeat, Hussar said. Did you not hear your daughter? Ah, there it is. Damien's eyes flared wide before narrowing to dangerous slits upon his fellow council member's frame. The bristling hatred spilled off him and drowned the room in a suffocating tension. That thing is not my daughter, Damien growled. Yes, yes. We all remember the situation with the window, Hussar said, shaking his head. It is a shame such a legacy as yours couldn't be extended past one generation, Why, I have 3 children of my own, and all their eyes are gold. And you had 1, didn't you? Have you tried again, Damien? Have you tried again and found any success? Damien glared at the snipper. Am I on trial, Hussar? Not at the moment, Hussar purred. I am just pointing out what a tragedy it is that your only offspring would become a blue. And here we were all hoping the best for you. The human sneered, and Hussar chuckled before looking back to Eris. My point is, he chimed, that this creature is not from our part of the galaxy. Cutting off its head may do nothing. It may not even be privy to our regulations and systems of eye color. Surely you don't mean that Vix's holy reach remains only within our small part of the galaxy, Damien said. That just because it's an outsider, that this thing isn't the tool of Gwahor. Surely I mean that none of us here really believe that, do we? Hussar replied, his cold gold eyes meeting Damien's. Unless, General Sel, I have offended you in some way. No, Councilman, Eris replied with a courteous smile. See? Hussar hummed, looking over towards Kuroda. Now, tell us, Sir Kuroda, what is it you are here for again? Safe, Kuroda replied, after a moment of pause. You are quite safe here, yes, Hussar replied, an amused smile in his voice. We will allow no harm to come to you. What was it you were fleeing? Monster, Kuroda replied, his voice echoing in the bare room. The small pair of hands on his chest motioned, searching for the right words as he fell silent. The trio of council members sat quietly, waiting for him to continue. Monster, Kuroda said again. Eat. Eat. Hussar tilted his head. What do you mean, eat? Eat, Kuroda insisted. He tapped his chest. Eat. Hussar made a face, his pincers clicking together in thought. He looked to Silva, Damien, then over to Eris. I am at a loss, General Sel. Explain. Of course, Eris replied. From our conversations during our flight here, it appears that the person he fled from wished to eat him. I believe it's a metaphor. I asked if he was wounded, and he explained that he was forced to flee from his home. It seems this other person took over his rule. Curious, Hussar muttered. So does that mean someone will come for us? Come for him? Silva inquired, a whine pitching her voice a few octaves higher. Stay, Kuroda said. With his smaller pair of hands, he pointed down towards his feet. He stay! His attacker is happy to remain on his own planet, Eris interpreted. That's what the attacker wanted, to take over. But this creature was a king? Silva asked. Yes, Councilwoman. You, Kuroda said, nodding to the woman. Am you. Eris watched as the woman's expression shifted from confused, furrowed brows to a pleasant, prideful smile. A king like her, a ruler over all the planet. Arrogant. Where was it that you said you found this man? Silva asked, looking to Eris. Councilwoman, that is something of a concerning matter. Eris exhaled and shook her head. It is treason. Get on with it, Damien snapped. We aren't sitting here to listen to your feelings. Of course, Councilman. Eris's words were smooth, like a knife between the ribs. She turned her eyes to Silva. I believe that you all would have been alerted to the situation, but it seems General Cassar did not inform you. He was holding Kuroda under duress on the cipher? Silva blinked. What? General Cassar did this, Hassar growled. He turned to Damien on his right. You should know about this. You're the head of the Opus, aren't you, Father? My, what a scandal. Lies spun by a worthless blue child. Damien waved his hand dismissively. She has no proof of this claim. I do, actually, Councilman, Eris said. With all due respect, there are documents and files currently stored on the General's workplace computer, along with messages between him and a soldier under his guidance. They were attempting to conduct experiments. And you expect me to believe this? Damien's eyes narrowed upon her plump frame, searching for the weakness he used to stab at. Her weight, her intelligence, the vitiligo hidden beneath her crimson uniform. But this time he would find nothing. She was stone. And with a small, confident smile, she answered him. After I returned home with Kuroda, I had my suspicions. I was able to remotely download the files, Councilman. It's so easy to steal Opus files. Hassar looked to Damien, the threat clear in his voice. Oh, goodness, Father. Are you failing at your job? Impossible, Damien insisted. Security is tight enough. Apparently not, Hassar said, turning to Eris. Do you have these files? I do, Councilman. Eris tapped her wrist hollow, a small circular band cast in sleek metal with several buttons upon its side. She pressed one of them, and a small holographic screen appeared above it. Displayed were the files, and with a quick swipe upwards, it was sent off to everyone in the room. The ghouls looked at their own hollows, poring over the information with scrutinizing eyes and furrowed brows. Eris watched with mild satisfaction as her father bristled, his jaw locked. These all could have been forged, he said, dismissing the accusations with a flick of his wrist. There is no way to guarantee she's not making some petty power play. That could be the case, Hassar remarked, but I've never known a blue to be so thorough. They are bred for violence, not espionage. He looked to Eris. No offense, General Sell. None at all, Councilman. If it so pleases you, Council members, I would encourage seizing General Cassar's folders for yourselves to verify these claims. She folded her hands behind her back and awaited their verdict. Surely we aren't considering, Damien started. I think there's no harm in searching the folders, Silva chimed, looking to her fellow golds. It'll be better to ensure our civilians are safe from a treacherous blue, no? You do have a point, Hassar said, a smile pulling at his lips. He looked to Damien. Wouldn't you agree? Damien, with a scowl dragging his features down, gave a stiff nod. On his hollow, he initiated the orders to his subordinates. As for you, Sir Kuroda, Hassar said, we might be convinced to give you a place to stay, should you provide us something in return. Make safe, Kuroda replied with a nod. Hunger. We don't have a famine issue, sir, Hassar replied. He rested his upper two elbows on the table and intertwined his fingers. What else? Kuroda rested one large hand on Eris's shoulder and peered at her, his eyes searching. Make, he muttered. Fight? Eris asked, arching a curious brow, as if this was news to her, as if they hadn't practiced this for hours. Are you wanting to fight? Fight! Make safe! Kuroda nodded and looked to the gold, leaving his hand on Eris's shoulder. Fight! You want to fight? Damien's voice was incredulous. You want to... What? I think he wants to make it safe here, as a thank you for letting him stay, council members. Eris looked at Kuroda. Is that about right? Yes, he said. Yes, fight! Make safe! A cruel, malicious smile curled Damien's lips upwards. Is that so? He cooed. You want to go fight on the front lines with General Sel here? That does not change the fact that his eyes are green, Silva said. Sending a green to the front line? The Blues will not care, Damien said with a grin. They are soldiers. They will accept whatever help that is given to them. I believe if he wishes to prove his worth by helping secure Sobek for the Empire, that we should allow it, Hussar said. I agree, Damien hummed. And if he perishes during the fighting, then it can't be helped. Certainly, Hussar said. And we will know then for sure that he was of no threat. And if he survived the asteroid field, he should be able to survive a few little battles, Silva said with a nod. Maybe he could show the Blues how to finally get things done. That would be quite beneficial, Damien said. Then it is agreed, Silva said. General Sel, you and this Kuroda will leave in the morning and return to Sobek. Tomorrow morning? Eris stiffened. No, I was supposed to have more time. A few days here, at least. Damn it! There, Hussar added. You are tasked with ensuring the Empire's victory by stopping the... what is the silly name you Blues gave her? Councilman? Eris asked, brows furrowing, doing her best to calm her raging mind. Everything has to change. Some queen, some... Eris blinked. A cold finger ran down the length of her spine. There was no startled plan-making, no workarounds being concocted in her skull. Everything was silent. She stopped breathing. The Mad Queen, she said. That's it. I heard she's quite the issue. Is that right, Damien? That is correct, Damien purred. She's been killing our useless Blues left and right. Perhaps these two can finally put an end to her. Eris didn't look at him. She wouldn't let him win. Not now. Not when she had already sacrificed so much. Of course, council members, Eris replied, saluting, pressing her fists over her heart. If it is what you wish. Every fiber of her flesh grew frigid. Good. Take Kuroda with you. He can stay in your apartment for the night, Hussar said. Keep that hood on. We don't need a panic over his eyes. Enough panic has happened from her having an apartment so high up, Damien said. Silva laughed. Did you get letters about that too? Well, we'll see what we can do about that once she gets back. Damien chuckled. Hussar waved his hands towards Kuroda and Eris. You are dismissed. Leave. Kuroda pulled his hood up. Eris bowed, a forced, tight smile on her lips as the laughter rang in her ears. She turned on her heel and headed out the door. Her heart smashed against her ribs, quicker each second. They wanted her dead. They wanted her blown apart by one of the Mad Queen's wretched bombs, legs caught in the limbs of trees. But I will return. And when I do, I will pull you from your rotting thrones.